Hi, welcome. My name's Dale McCluskey. On this video, it's part of a series called Flipping the Script. I'm going to be focusing in on asking the question as to, what is training really about? Once a relationship problem is underway between the dog and owner, in terms of defining both the role of the owner, as well as the question as to influence itself, how it comes into a process, and in terms of, again, as defined by, physical force, as some trainers call it, in terms of getting a dog to respond, to perform certain responses, as in this case here, and the title of this video really kind of, works into, okay, what I'm talking about by way of, again, title of the video is a workaround, okay, for dogs that don't want to down. Now, I would encourage you to watch the other video too to help to kind of connect some dots here, to really think about or consider, what is training? Is it just about getting dogs to, superficially, we'll talk about this, perform a down, a sit, a stay, and, and even in terms of, well, should you use treats? Should you not use treats? Should you force the dog? And again, this goes into the other video by way of my series. I encourage you to watch it by way of Larry Crone. And the title of that video is Never Force a Dog to Perform a Down. Okay, you should watch that video along with this video, as we're going to be talking about the same type of thing as the question is, what is training really about? Now, I talk a lot in my videos about, again, once a relationship problem is underway, what path does a process take? Like what, in terms of just in general terms, what does a process represent? I talk about this issue, well, it represents a intervention. Okay, intervention really kind of keying up on the role of, in terms of relationship, the role of the dog owner. And again, using the parenting example, which is my kind of go-to, because once you start to kind of think about the parenting example, things will start to make sense in terms of, the role of the parent when it comes to influencing change, the parental role. So, when you think about, okay, once a child has become selfish, ask yourself the question, well, does the process itself, in terms of that point in time, moving forward from there, does it take the path of a learning-based exercise, the way that these trainers, we'll talk about this, just superficially, jump in and start to, generate responses, and then, elevating those responses up as some sort of a standard to try to pass those off as though you could trust those responses as the be-all and end-all, as though that the perceptions of dogs are changing. But then consider the parenting example, because it lines up almost exactly the same way. Once a child is selfish, it's like coming in like Santa Claus and is using things that the child would want that they don't have access to that way, to say, well, if you clean up your room, you'll get a brand new Xbox game or whatever it is to motivate the child to respond. But ask the question, well, is it just about responses that way? Can you trust those responses, without you as a parent actually, bringing into the equation, in terms of your role, certain demands, structure, okay, interacting with the child in a meaningful way, starting to intercept, bad behaviors, influence. So again, when I talk about this whole thing about, what defines a process in the problem in the dog training world, and I talk about this disconnect happening where the responses don't seem to line up, okay? It can look amazing, at the front end within the training environment, very quickly as you're pulling out the treats, and it looks amazing. You get the pet all over your dog. How great is that? But it leads people into, and this is the problem, and to talk about a workaround, right? But really, it's this whole thing about, well, it leads people into assume that, influence isn't part of the equation. like, force as people, or leadership. But really the criteria here, when I talk about, how it aligns, how it comes in at the right level, how it plays into, beyond just responses, how it plays into change itself by way of, starting to change the perception of dogs in terms of, again, even getting dialed into the relationship the right way, in terms of a dog's state of mind, and intercepting the level of stinking thinking. Understand all these themes I talk about is all part of it. But beyond just simply responses, change itself. It's not just about, responses that way. In fact, the question people need to ask is, well, when you're taking your dog to a trainer and they just immediately start to get the dog to respond that way with the sit down, come and stay, you should be asking the question, well, is that really what it's about? Like, is it really just about getting the dog? Like, what's that even mean? Because really the question you ask, well, why should I trust those responses? Yeah, then again, when you start to really understand where I'm coming from, when I talk about, well, influence, control and influence being the core ingredients to reveal truth, to reveal the current state of relationship. Just like that's why I keep talking about the examples of the parent who, when you put a demand on a child to pick up their toys versus here's a new Xbox game. Think about, the difference between the two. Absolutely, you could get a child to be highly motivated to run out to the garbage can with, the trash for $100. But here's the problem. Once a relationship problem is underway, there's the disconnect. Trusting that, okay, you can trust the response. Is that absolutely not? See, and then when you start to connect some dots here, as this how common it is for dog owners to, to invest in this idea, how great things look in the training environment as you're using treats, but then you discover, hold on here a second, I'm still dealing with, nothing's changed. The dog can look amazing, in one moment for doing something they want. This goes to this whole issue about bribery, okay? When does bribery become bribery? Well, bribery becomes bribery when you're you're ignoring the fact that you're dealing with an actual relationship problem, and you're ignoring, you're trying to redefine what training is, or what a process is. You're trying to take it to a level of a learning-based exercise, and so therefore there's no depth. Okay, it does not reconcile a relationship problem the right way in terms of behavioral issues, what they represent. I talk about control, manifesting. So this is why, again, you see a lot of balanced dog trainers, they're not dialed into the dog's state of mind that way. They're standing there and they're merely looking at the physical response of a dog, and the dog's head will be pivoting, the dog will be, investing, the control is manifesting. And they're not concerned, they're not even trying to interrupt any of it. And that's a problem. But see, that's the point, is when it becomes just about the physical and not about the relational, not about the relationship in terms of the actual making the connection through, what defines change through, the role of influence, intercepting the dog's state of mind. See, that's the confusion, because then we get in this whole issue about, well, what's it, the issue about, and in this case here with this video put up by Sean O'Shea, one of his trainers, and the title really speaks volumes. It says, a workaround for dogs that don't want it down. And see, that's the question. You're going to see here in a second. I'm going to play this video. It's very short, but that's the question people need to ask. Well, is there really a workaround? What's that mean? Because then if you're just going to wait, here you're going to see the trainer just kind of wait it out, not actually, engaging with actually, bringing this dog under direct control and influence, just kind of waiting it out. Well, if you're going to do that, just use a treat. Just use a treat and get it over with. Like, see, that's the thing. See, this is why there's so much confusion in the dog training world. And this is why, if you go back to the Larry Crone video, I call it like exit stage left, where he goes out and the dog isn't responding. Of course, the title of the video is "Don't Force," but then he, when the dog isn't responding, isn't going into the down. Of course, he's not trying to bring the dog under any sort of intentional control or assert influence onto the dog. And consider this: if you're going to a dog trainer, why are you going there in the first place? You're going there because you're actually going there because you're experiencing a relationship problem. Okay, so the question should be, well, what is this really about? And then, Larry Crone exits stage left, comes back into view wearing a different shirt. So something happened. If you're changing your shirt, you're spending some time doing something. But then if you're going out there and you say you're using a motivating agent such as treats, right? Because you assume that's what he would have done because the title of the video says don't use force. So he isn't interacting the way that I show in terms of how influence, comes into a process to create change. So if you're using treats to generate a response, and so that's the expectation, that's what kind of the agreement you're signing with the dog. You come back into camera view, the dog's highly motivated because there's been almost like an exchange of currency. Okay, there's been a certain expectation. You do this, you get that. The dog goes right into the down very fast. It's like, good boy. But the question is, well, good boy based on what? Consider if you're 5 minutes into a relationship problem, is that response actually trustworthy to say that's good? See, that's the problem in the dog training world. It's not. Okay, understand, because that's why when you hook a dog on a leash and start to bring a dog under intentional control and influence, the dog will start to go up into a level of challenge if, in fact, you're dealing with a relationship problem. Just like putting a demand on the child to take the garbage out. When influence and control are part of the equation, which they need to be, then you're going to see the truth. But also that's what generates change. So here I'm going to play some of this video because this is the question people need to ask is, what is training really about? And what I show is, well, no, it's an intervention. It's not about motivating dogs to respond from the get-go that way. You shouldn't be doing that, period. Because when you're doing that, you're setting in motion for many dogs and owners a counterfeit picture. Okay, at a response level. Just like the same thing if you do that with a selfish child in the middle of a relationship problem in a very superficial way, well, that's bribery. Okay, that's what you're engaging in. And you're trying to, you're assuming that those responses can be trusted as though the child's attitude's changed. Well, that's ridiculous. You know that you shouldn't expect that. That's not going to work. Okay, the parents needs to be, interacting with, engaged, involved. All the themes go along with the authoritative parenting style. Those things are all part of change itself. It's defined through the parental role, the social aspect of, again, how that's influenced that way. The interplay between parent and child. And same holds true. Dogs are social animals. It's the same thing. And again, I keep saying this, but just consider, it's not like, don't take my word for it. Just look at how common it is for people to invest time, money, and energy. Dogs look amazing moving around the training environment, only to discover that it's a disconnected picture. Okay, change isn't actually happening. The possessive dogs aren't actually changing the right way. You're still dealing with a relationship problem, and then guess what? The dog gets the blame. Okay, understand this is built in. This is like a part of the package deal. This is like this has become normalized in the dog training world by way of both these groups of trainers. This is how it goes down. So I'm going to play some of this video, but again, this is all about understanding, okay, is there really a workaround? Okay, but what does that even mean?
Hey guys, Liz here with the Good Dog Los Angeles. I have Echo here with me. Weird his name. Echo, he is kind of a fearful, nervous guy. He's got some kind of bratty attitude tendencies as well, and he's giving me a hard time on the down. So
right here, interesting. So she's saying about, got bratty attitude, nervous. So understand that, once a dog has gained a level of control in the relationship, okay, it brings a stress load onto the dog. The dog is basically caught in between two worlds. Okay, dogs are social animals. So they share a special, connection with other dogs, with humans that way. The social connection. Okay, so strength and weakness is defined in terms of within the pack relationship hierarchy. Those things are very real. But again, in terms of the role of influence, understand that is real too. Okay, that's needed, it's necessary. Okay, it's not about being abusive. Okay, people assume that, when you're when you're bringing a dog under intentional control and influence. But here's the thing, it doesn't mean that you're not going to have the dog is going to not like it. Okay, and this is the problem too. When you get into this whole thing with this superficial idea of things, the ability to be able to work through certain reactions and beyond them to actually resolve a relationship problem is highly problematic. Okay, when you deal with this type of a process, this idea that trains a learner-based exercise, because then this is why, in terms of the context of agreeableness, okay, that's a big theme. Even in terms of certain concepts such as counter conditioning. So what attaches to certain concepts are the themes of bribery, accommodation, negotiation. And so consider, again, just like the selfish child example, absolutely you can get a selfish child to come into agreement with, sharing or getting along where they are not wanting to because of their bad attitude. They're very selfish. But if a parent is quarterbacking it based on, again, on their parenting style, if they're engaging that way in terms of bribery, yeah, you can gain agreeableness, but it doesn't mean you're fixing the relationship. So understand, this goes into this whole thing within the dog training world, why people are spinning their wheels with certain concepts, why they can never resolve a relationship problem, even though you have moments that seem like offer hope as though, okay, it looks like this is working, and it's really not. Because it's taking a path, it's following a path where the dog is maintaining control. Control gives comfort. Control gives the appearance of a balanced dog. Just like a selfish child can look well behaved most of the day, but again, think about the moments that reveal truth. Okay, where control, influence are part of the interplay, part of the interaction. That's why when you get a dog on a leash, then you're going to see it. But it also represents, again, the ingredients for change. So here you have a situation you're talking about, well, the dog doesn't like the down. Well, here, this is the thing. Well, why doesn't the dog like the down? It doesn't like the down if you're actually bringing the dog under intentional control and influence. And see, that's the point. It's interesting, too, when I'm working with and helping dog owners, it's interesting, and you can put this to the test. I actually have a couple of videos on my YouTube channel that actually show this, to help people apply some critical thinking as to what is this really about. And it's the moment where dog owners have the dog in a sit position, like this dog here is in a sit position, beside them on the leash, and they're starting to interact. They have the dog under intentional control. The dog isn't liking it. Okay, you can see, you'll tell the dog's starting to have a certain response to that. And then there's a moment, it happens quite a bit where the dog is wanting it to stop, but the dog goes into a down on their own, and the owner allows it. But the interplay is they're already engaged in a type of power play type of interaction. So a dog's response, what's happening is the dog it's about who's in control, and the dog goes into a down to make it stop. And the owner sometimes will look at that response and say, well, maybe that's good. But then I'm like, no, get your dog back up into the sit. So that the owner will bring influence over the leash. The dog will, after a moment or two, under control, the dog will respond to it. But the dog already knows what's happening. Okay, the dog already knows the real deal, that the person's starting to take control. And so it changes the whole dynamic of what's happening the right way. But then what I'll say is, okay, you let the dog go into a down on their own as you're engaging in a type of power play. But now I want you to start to push on the dog's shoulders to bring the dog into the down. You say force the dog, but when you bring a dog under control through the leash, intentional control, and then you're bringing influence onto the dog for the down, you put your hand on the dog's shoulder blades, and you start to just lean in. You don't have to be overly forceful, and that's not what you're doing. Not trying to push really hard on the dog, but you're pushing in a way where the dog understands the intent. Okay, understand this is very important to think about when I talk about intent. Okay, you're not engaging in saying down, because if you say down, the dog might go down based again on a certain expectation that's already been established in the relationship the wrong way. If you do it down, you get a treat. You do it down, you're going to get a emotional connection type of response. Now it's about control. But the interesting thing is, when the dog owner starts to assert influence onto the dog for the down, guess what happens? The dog refuses. The dog rejects it. The dog gets stubborn. And then the question I ask, and because you have to break it down this way, well, why do you think the dog isn't doing it? Is it because the dog didn't hear a command? Well, no, the dog understands the intent because of how you're pushing. Right? Not pushing overly, but the dog understands the intent because of the direction with how you're pushing. Well, then what's really happened? Because the dog just went down a second ago because you allowed it as you were, influence is part of the equation. But now the dog's rejecting it. But then they start to really think about, say, well, yeah, no, it's about who's in control. Okay, I understand. Dogs are amazing animals. But that's the point. It's not about if it's just about a down, without the ingredients, the core ingredients of influence and control, well, of course you're going to use a treat, but then it's meaningless. That's the point here. So here you see this level of confusion in a way, saying, well, she started into it that way, and this dog rejected because, well, that's the point. You're dealing with a relationship problem that's already underway here. And so then it's like the question is, well, what are you going to do about that? Well, let's play some more of this and see how she responds to this.
So this is day 3 with him. I've actually started layering e-collar with place and sit because he knows those two. But he's giving me a really hard time with the down. Fought quite a bit. He's super vocal. And because he's on the sensitive side, I'd rather not just fight with him. It's just not going to get us anywhere. He might get overwhelmed. He might actually not be able to learn in that moment.
So right here. So key up on the word. She used the word learn. Okay, I understand that, when you hear words like use a certain way, that will bend towards this whole thing about bribing dogs. Okay, learn. It's not about learning. It's a power play. Okay, you don't want to think about learning that way. This is about, it's an intervention. The dog coming into agreement with, through intentional control and influence the right way. So the motivator is the relationship. Okay, you're not going to use treats. You're not going to see. That's the problem here. So here she's saying, well, what do I do, basically? But you get this thing. Well, the dog responded with a remote collar. You watch the other videos. I do talk about that too. About the role of influence by way of balanced dog training. How it's not proactive. Okay, it's like cherry picking certain moments. But that again is a problem because it has to come in at the right level. It has to come in a proactive way to intercept. Okay, and again, when I talk about this whole thing with fighting with the dog, well, that can be, a problem as well through the confusion and balanced dog training, because I talk, in terms of, the intent, in terms of making sense to the dog. When you watch my videos, how I'm doing it, it's not about, bringing a dog under a lot of influence in a way that's going to create high conflict. Okay, so even the interactions themselves, they need to speak the right language as I describe it. It's intent. They need to kind of join up. So you're doing basically moving the same way all the time. So the dog makes sense of. If it's erratic, it's going to be a problem. All right. So, but again, it's important that, again, through a interaction-based method, that's what generates change. Okay, that's what brings influence into the equation by way of the interactions, what they represent. That's what brings it in at the right level. And that's what, again, in terms of dealing with the dog's level of stinking thinking, as I call it, that's what dials you into a dog's state of mind so that it's going to be meaningful. The dog's going to make sense of it.
So instead I've got him sitting on that nice comfy bed there. I'm getting some work done as well. And as soon as he's like falling asleep, as soon as he actually lays down, I'm going to mark it with down and then give him a little piece of kibble.
So here you got a thing with basically, I just going to wait this out. Let's just let the dog get tired, right? And then I'm going to mark it. Okay, but what are you marking? Okay, and then the question is, well, in terms of influence itself being meaningful by way of intentional, by way of, actually, bringing this together through an interaction, that's not happening here. Okay, I talk about, the dog making sense of it, connecting it directly to, it could be the trainer or owner. But there's this whole thing with this at a physical level. This is just about a physical response. This isn't about, how this connects by way of relationship. And think of it this way in terms of a parent-child interaction. It's like dealing with a bratty, selfish child, and instead of kind of, interacting with the child in a way that's personal, having like a personal, close proximity type of interaction, you're going to kind of just shut the child's door and just wait it out for, but again, ask yourself the question, well, in terms of, meaningful change, in terms of the parental role with it lining up, it needs to, okay? So this is more just about the physical level. And that's the problem. Understand that this question, that's why there's so much confusion in the dog training world, because then I would just say, well, if you're going to do this, just use a treat and get it over with, right? Because it's not even about depth anyway. It's not about even, tying this in properly. This is just about the physical. That's why I get in this whole issue about people that will engage in, say, exercising the dog to try to, give the dog an outlet or give a dog a job. But understand that if it's disconnected from your role, if it doesn't line up, then yeah, the dog will look more compliant as you're exercising the dog. But that's the problem, is that appearances. But the problem is, as soon as the dog has had some rest and something to eat, they're going to be be just as full of that energy. But then the issue is how that filters through the relationship. If you have a relationship problem, it's about control. It doesn't be destructive. It doesn't be tearing up your couch. It's going to manifest. That's the point. You have to connect some dots. But it's no different than a selfish child. You can wear a selfish child out through exercise, but as soon as they got some rest and something to eat, they're going to be just as selfish as they were a few hours later. But they'll seem more compliant when you've exercised, when the child's exercising and they're worn down. And then you could assume that, wow, they seem better. But see, it's all about the role of the parent, just like the parenting example with a child. It's about their level of engagement, being dialed in, how they're interacting with. All those things have to line up because it's about relationship. So here, this thing about, well, when the dog gets, worn down here and, and the dog at the physical level goes into a down, I'm just going to mark it. But what are you marking? Just like waiting it out.
Yeah. Good.
And then, the treat. Well, just use the treat. Because there's so much confusion here. Might as well just use the treat from the start and avoid having to even go through this type of a exercise. Okay? Because the point is, if it's not lining up the way I described, then there's a problem. All right, the role of influence, got to line up. But again, I encourage you to watch the other video. Again, the Larry Crone video is titled, Never Force, a down. Again, I go through the same thing about asking those questions as to, okay, what is this really about? So my encouragement, check out my website, lots of great information. I talk about what defines a process by way of an intervention, in terms of thinking different about, the issue about motivating a response. Okay, you don't want to think that way. Okay, the relationship is the motivator. And then you want to align, once a relationship problem is underway, you want to tie into, align with a interaction-based method that's going to reconcile both your role as well as the role of influence by way of changing the perception of dogs the right way. Thanks for watching.